Welcome to Fundraising Leaders with Drew, where we embark upon a journey into the heart and soul of nonprofit fundraising and decode the strategies that lead to fundraising success. I'm your host, Drew Clancy, and I am grateful to be joined today by Lisette Nieves, who is the president for the Fund for the City of New York. Lisette is a Rhodes Scholar. She holds a Doctor of Education from the University of Pennsylvania, and she is a champion of social entrepreneurship and a seasoned leader in the nonprofit sector. During our discussion today, Lisette will share her insights on the intersection of fundraising, program development, and the role of capital in driving social impact. Let's jump right in with Lisette. Well, Lisette, thank you so much for agreeing to be on Fundraising Leaders with Drew. Really looking forward to our conversation today. So let's just start right off with as president of the fund for the city of New York. Tell us a little bit about how you approach leveraging capital to support your work, your mission-driven work.
Sure, absolutely. So the Fund for the City of New York is 55 years old, and putting it in context, so I've been with it for 5 years leading the helm. And what we do is we provide the complete back office responsibilities for about 100 different nonprofit organizations. So we're able to do that at a very small rate. So it's a revenue generating stream as well for the organization. And I say that because that's another way of thinking about that. We're also in collaboration and have raised funds from individuals. We work closely with the city to provide interest-free or low-cost lending to nonprofits. And that's huge. And we've given out over the last 20 years well over $1.5 billion, probably by now, dollars in that loan fund. And we're really proud of that. And so when you think about this, it's really important that you think about capital as a way, as I say, capital releases energy.
Yes.
I think about it's capital is trapped energy, and when you use it, you release the energy. And so in this particular sector, it's a sector that doesn't have access to low interest lending because they have to wait for delays in contracts and things like that. And so this is an opportunity to really solve that and support that for the nonprofit sector. Others of them are also welcome to New York. You get to hear the sounds of the streets. You also get to have an opportunity to see those who are doing strategic planning and growth, and they may be looking at properties, and lending might be an option for them to think about further growth. And so that's how we think about it that way. We're also a small grant maker. We don't consider ourselves a foundation, but we do give very small grants, but typically to the organizations that we've been supporting already. So that's just a small piece of what the fund does, yes. And we also build and incubate new ideas, which means we'll also, on one side, bring in resources to build a new initiative.
Tell us how much of your funding is public versus private? And obviously, those are two very different approaches.
It really varies. Probably, I would probably say if you separate things, that's a really interesting question.
Sure.
Because it really varies. Overwhelmingly private, I would say that, more of that. But there's quite a bit of government because since we oversee a significant number of nonprofits, they get quite a bit of government funds as well, too. So it varies depending on the portfolio.
Sure. Do you all actually then raise money from private donors?
We do. We do that as well. And we'll do that because it gives us the enormous flexibility, but we'll raise funds to do things that are different than the portfolio organizations that we support. It's important that they see that there is a distinction. So, for example, right now, we run a center for youth in the future of work, and we're doing some interesting research that wouldn't be coming out of any of our portfolio organizations right now. And
Sure.
we're really proud of that. And so that would be a different set of funders. We're doing an incredible AI initiative, particularly across nonprofits, on how to leverage it, how not to be intimidated by it, how to really think about incorporating it. And we have funders that have come to the table that want to support that initiative. So that's examples of how we can build things for the field while also supporting the field.
Wow. 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 Yeah. Any further thoughts? Obviously, AI is
Yeah.
just been incredible here in
Yeah.
the last 12, 18, 24 months and the
Yeah.
impact. How are you starting to see that?
Oh, I think for first of all, anybody, and Drew, I love that you have this whole higher ed background as well, too. And as a seasoned leader yourself, AI has been significant, particularly in looking at administration, right? There is no question, very few shops are not using AI. We've been using AI for a while in HR. When we're
Sure.
overseeing, as we're saying, being the fiscal sponsor for close to 100 organizations, our HR shop has to use AI and it has to use it really efficiently. And that really helps. And that's part of what's grown about it. But other than AI being this sophisticated search engine, it's actually anticipating. And so I think some of these tasks that people had thought about in the past are now leveraging AI to see it as this kind of assistant that they wouldn't have had in the past.
Sure.
So, preliminarily reading through contracts, it doesn't mean that you do not use external talent, but AI has been extremely helpful in that. I've seen AI be used in classrooms in helping coach teachers. I mean, it blows me away of what could be the range of it. There is fear and there is intimidation.
Sure.
And generationally, I want to add that. So let me put a caveat to that. Younger generations have been using it. It's not a problem. I think of my 19-year-old son, please. He's been doing this for a while, right? So we have set up these challenges where we really ask different nonprofits, and many have joined us to say, take these baby steps, try using this so that you're
Sure.
not intimidated. And we're really seeing them do incredible things they would have never done before. So we're excited about that.
Love it. Love it. I was actually at a conference this week, and one of the speakers was talking about it's really that it's a collaborator. It's a partner in all the work we do, or can
Yeah.
be, and
Yeah.
sort of an expert collaborator, which is really neat.
Yeah.
Um,
But I
coming,
would add an expert collaborator, but it's important that you understand who sees and knows your data,
yeah,
right? So I would say for people who are thinking of trying it out, there are ways of doing it there are ways of controlling your privacy. So I'll give an example. The reason why we started the AI initiative, we know that there are people who are doing AI in organizations, but there may have been sensitive information that may have been out there. So how do we make sure that people can try, but do it in a safe space where we also protect the information? And that's a key. Then it could be leveraged as an assistant and as an innovation and as an experiment in organization versus having data that you wouldn't have expected to be out there.
sure, 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 sure. Um, coming back to in maybe looking at the role of public private partnerships
Yes.
and ways to strengthen the financial resilience of nonprofits. Are there any examples perhaps
They
that come to
are.
mind
Yeah,
of
there's
really good where this
yeah,
has really worked and working well?
sure, I'm happy to talk about that. What I think is important is we always say that the most innovative ideas and lasting ideas are those where leaders have crossed silos for partnership, for collaboration. We think that's extremely important. And so we're thinking, let's take, for example, the workforce development kind of area. Let's say that. We see a level of intermediary organizations that are leveraging the best of higher ed, leveraging the best of corporate America to place young people and what are career-driven opportunities that wouldn't have happened by themselves. And it's not that higher ed's not fantastic, and it's not that corporate America's not fantastic, but sometimes you need the translator and this kind of cross-sectoral partnership to make that work really well. And that part we've seen that over and over again with different excellent intermediaries. And it's really important, particularly when there's a gap in talent. So if we know there's a gap in talent in some areas of tech or in some areas of healthcare, this has been extremely important. So I would say some of those are some of the best models where you see collaborative funding and collaborative effort, all to get college talent directed where it should be.
Right, 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 right. You actually in your current role, but in prior to your current role, have really been a social entrepreneur.
Yeah.
How has your experience with that uh, influenced your approach to resource allocation and fundraising in the
Oh,
nonprofit sector?
oh my goodness. Drew, that's like the $1,000,000 question, right? Because of being the one I love this question because it does. It is your positionality, your experience, your life experience you bring in. It's a lens, it's a way of understanding and sense making of the world. And it impacts the way I think about things. So, for example, because I had built things and I love building things, I know how important it is to have general operating support, right? It's important to have flexible funds, right? If I have an idea to build something, I want to build champions around me who are going to be able to donate funds where those funds are flexible. That's so important, particularly in startup. And let me tell you, that's the value that we see in the private sector, right? They know
Sure,
that in startups, you need that, right? This is not, so this concept is truly important in the nonprofit sector as well, because entrepreneurial energy can get stifled by highly bureaucratic and very stringent demands. And so this is important to think about. How do you cultivate champions that understand and want to support general operating support as well? And so that for me, that was huge. And that's about the leader. People invest in the leader. They want to see the leader be successful. When I had started up Year Up New York and founded that office, you know, we weren't sure. We knew that the model existed in Boston. We knew it could do well in New York. I'm a New Yorker. I'm not from Boston. And, at the end of 5 years, we had close to 26 different companies on Wall Street supporting apprenticeships for young people. And I will tell you, that was about champion raising. I never call it fundraising, I call it champion raising. And I
sure.
call it friend raising. So when you say champions and friends before funds, funds come, no
Yeah.
question. And
Yeah.
that's how I think about that.
Is there a particular example perhaps
Sure.
where, or one or two, whatever,
Yeah.
where you really saw that come into being, and how did you
Sure.
approach it?
Oh, I love it. No, there are some things, but one thing is important is that there's work that has to be done and some research too. And AI can help in that too, but you have to check it. Like you want to know who you're talking to and you want to get a sense of what their interests are. You've done incredible work, Drew, with alums, and you know how important it is to go prepared, right? You want to have a sense of, hey, did they have a great experience in their as alums, right? What did they work on?
Sure,
What are the things they're passionate about? And so I would say that's the same way potentially when you're meeting with someone that you're particularly interested in seeing if you could champion them. And then I usually start, and I'll give an example. One was important in the organization Year Up, which still exists, and it's a wonderful organization, um, where you think about who was the person who had a year up. And so what does that mean? It means in a value sense, who understood that the position they were in was also connected to someone that gave them opportunity. That's actually really important. And there are different times in people's lives who understand that moment. So it was great meeting people who were in their 50s and 60s of their high effectiveness, but also realized that they wanted to contribute back and understood what it meant. For me, our greatest champions at Europe were those who understood no one ever does it alone,
sure.
that people invest in you. And when you can get people in touch with that, they want to get in touch with that. They want to be there for someone else. And so that was very much the connection we had. And I loved it because I was able to find out and meet, executive vice president of corporations who maybe started at community college,
Sure.
right? Or went to night school. And think about that, right? Think about like what it means to live in a place where you have experienced for your family a great level of social mobility. You understand that's about this context, but you also, in the American context, but you also understand it's about the opportunities people afforded you. And so when you tap into that, that's how we were able to build so many partnerships. If that's
Love
helpful
that.
as an example. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, Thinking a little bit or continuing on this theme of innovation, how do you think nonprofits can innovate or continue to innovate in their fundraising approaches,
Yeah.
to adapt to changing
Sure.
economic
Sure.
conditions? And yeah,
Yeah, and there are changing economic conditions. So there are a couple of things. One is it doesn't happen overnight, but it is good to have someone, and I'm not saying hire a fancy consultant or anything like that. No, but it's good to have someone that you trust say to you, how are we showing up in the field? Like, what are people noticing about us in the field? Are you thought leaders in the field? If that's the case, maybe you can monetize some of that, right? So there are ways of thinking about some of the work that you could be doing. Is there a fee for service opportunity? I always think about that. What could be a revenue generating stream that might be really interesting that fits within your values, but offers an alternative route of revenue generation than you thought.
sure,
Uh, I think that's always an important one. I think the other one is thinking about um, always reminding yourself every few years in a deep dive on the values. Are you living the values that you have in a mission driven organization? And where are you being most impactful and effective? And where you're not, that's where some tough calls have to be made too. So you want to really think through those pieces because innovation is going to come from two moments. It comes from moments where sometimes people may feel flushed and say, oh, I could try something new. But the truth is, innovation actually comes from moments of scarcity. And people become unbelievably creative in moments of scarcity. So you could decide in scarcity that you shut down that creative side of you, or you can say, I'm going to explore it and try something I hadn't done before. And I actually think um, permission giving during those times are really important because you will find things out you wouldn't have expected about yourself and the team.
love that. Love that. So true. Is there, thinking back, is there a particular example perhaps that,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's
I'll
a,
give
a
one.
challenging moment
Mhm.
and how
Sure.
that led to
Well,
innovation?
what's interesting? Um, how I actually got into doing a lot of leadership work was literally someone who approached me and said, I believe in what you do. So this is an example, like this is just an outside person. I believe in what you do. And I want you to reproduce that as an opportunity for X number of people. Can you put together something for that? That led to 20 years of doing training retreats, summits, writing about training, building a doctoral program in leadership and innovation. And I say that because like you get messengers, right?
Sure,
True. And you had
sure.
this, right? Like who comes to you and who says that? And versus saying no and saying this is not a route I should be exploring. It's not what I do all the time. It's leaning in and saying, actually, I want to do this because you know what? I love that I have someone who wants to champion me to do this. So there are more champions than critics. And I say that. It's not that I'm Pollyanna. I'm not. There are always critics, and you have to be prepared for your critics. But if you only are focused on your critics, you are stifled.
No
If
doubt.
you understand who your champions are, you are liberated. And that allows for what I think of the vertical learning curves, the opportunities for innovation, the opportunities for creativity and cross collaboration.
Love that. Love that. And love the personal story too. So
Mhm.
compelling, so inspiring.
Thanks.
Um, Maybe following up, it's interesting, as you said, there's always
Mhm.
critics out there.
Yeah.
Um, can you think of an example perhaps where some feedback you
Yeah.
received that you were able to turn that perhaps and use that as a source of innovation?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing that's important is that each environment has its own unspoken internal timeline for how much and how fast they can handle change, right?
No doubt.
Well, and I would say universities are not the fastest.
You-
And so, I have to be conscious of how my entrepreneurial energy can show up in an environment that needs a lot more consensus building and a lot more championing to move it through. And I was able to do that with some other great colleagues when we were building this doctoral program at NYU. That's different than when I was building my own organization. That's totally different. That's different than, and so I say that because that is where I'm conscious of where the feedback, there are ways that people give you feedback that you should be conscious. It's not always verbal. It's about who comes to the meetings. Are they on time? Where are the, all those things are signals around energy, around what is this process of change you're making. I think the other thing I probably learn through feedback is, and I learned this early in my career, I'm so grateful for it, and I use it all the time. The most important thing that I always tell leaders is you under communicate. You don't realize how much you under communicate. And that's because it's in our heads. I keep a tab by my bedside, a notepad. Just because it's going through my mind all this time doesn't mean it's going through everyone else's mind all this time. So you have to really discipline yourself to kind of constantly remind folks of where we're going and why we're going there. And it may sound repetitive to you, but it's actually not. It's the different ways that people have to absorb and internalize this. And I actually think that's probably one of the most important things. People will trust and follow you in what I call the gray if you are painting a picture of a future that they feel really strong about, and if they know you're doing that consistently. And so that's a key thing that feedback has given me.
Mm, love that. Love that. What a great leadership lesson indeed. Um, let's follow up on communication and obviously so critical. Um, as a leader in the nonprofit sector, seasoned leader, um, what about in terms of the organization itself and its mission, and
Oh, absolutely.
certainly internally, but externally as well? How do you approach that? How can you communicate your impact to potential donors and supporters, or how do you see that?
Oh wow. It's actually it's one where, especially right now, like if you said that 20 years ago, Drew, it's a different conversation, right? I mean, we're doing a podcast right now, right? So this idea of elevating your message and leveraging social media is critical in ways that are part of communication that would not have been part of communication 20 odd years ago. And so I would say messaging looks different. It is in shorter spurts. It has to be really focused. And so how you communicate has to have that. So your what I call the artifacts of an organization. Shine talks about this in thinking about culture in an organization, your website, your materials, all those things. You have to have a multi-generational lens look at them. And that's important because you could get stuck and you don't want to get stuck, right? How do people understand impact? I say the other thing for nonprofits, it's not just saying what the impact is how do people feel and absorb impact? So there is an emotive release and extension to nonprofits and the role that they play in the United States. And so that's an extra piece um, that's important for nonprofits to tap into that we care about. Actually, in next week, there's a journal called Vital City. It comes out of New York, and I wrote a piece on a Marshall Plan for nonprofits, and it's really saying, yeah, and it's talking about what are the challenges that nonprofits face, but how can we think about still positivity in the future for nonprofits? And so, so check it out. I think I'm excited about it, but
We
but
can link to that on our podcast page here, so
sure. Okay.
we'll follow up and be sure to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm happy to send that. But it's, Drew, it's really, when you're thinking about communication, Um, you're going to have what I call the bearers and culture carriers that are real champions of it. And you have to decide at all the levels who are those people that stand out. The most closest to the work, it could be someone internal and so I think that we have to build champions at every piece of it. So I'll give an example.
Please.
At the Fund for the City of New York, it's so important that our back office shop has the most excellent, as we know, fiscal skills. We're doing the back office. We have to give enormous confidence in that. We have to have clean, as we say, audit
Sure.
all of those things, right? Now, I have to tell you, we have people who are in our finance shop that are some of the greatest champions. You talk to them and you've never seen anyone so excited about numbers and doing work that might make anybody else's eyes glaze over and you go, that person is living in their purpose. They are doing their
Right.
work. That's why it's important for leaders to understand you have to make sure that you have opportunities for champions to talk across the organization, across the roles and responsibilities, because you never know where your next champion is going to come from externally. So I had someone who was doing much more of the legal work at Year Up for us, but she was a chatter. I call her a chatter. She's wonderful, a wonderful woman. Her name is Karen Fleshman. And she, many years ago, she was on a train ride and she met someone and that was it. She gave them the pitch about the organization and then they became a partner. Who would have thought? The partner's
Yeah.
paying us to host apprenticeship. And so this is an example where like making sure everybody's really comfortable with talking about the organization because the more they hear you, the more they can say it as well too. And that was super helpful. And I always loved using her as the example because I was like, you meet someone and they're like, oh yeah, we were sitting, on the bus together. I was like, what? Okay, or on the plane or whatever. And you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. And so uh, that's why it's important to communicate and model what they can communicate your team as well.
Love that. Love that. I find the cash flow loan program that
Yes.
you are, I mean, talk
Huge.
about impact.
Oh, it's
Um,
huge.
you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that
More.
program and from kind of a fundraising or from a
Sure. Oh, this
how,
is
yeah,
yeah,
how,
no, thank you. I think it's important when we're talking to nonprofits, and this is where we talk about business separate from nonprofits. And the truth is, nonprofits are also managing a profit and loss statement. They just don't call it a profit and loss statement, right? A P&L. I say they still
sure,
manage a P&L. And the challenge is that for nonprofits, if they're relying on government resources or cycled money that may come from foundations that are cyclical, as we say, and changes by dates, their programming may not be aligned to those cycles. So they have to think really clearly. They have to figure out what's going to happen when it's low tide versus high tide here. How are they going to manage that? And I actually say managing cash flow is really managing excellent quality programming as well too. It is hard to do when others are not as disciplined in getting the money out as when they're supposed to get the money out. And that's a super challenge, right? So if money's committed to an organization, but it's on hold or delay, and we know that's happening. I'm not taking a particular stand on it. Think about the organizations who've already planned for that. That's a
sure,
real challenge for these organizations. We see that. And so that's why it's important to have an opportunity outside of traditional banking where um, nonprofits are not penalized because of other delays. So they're able to what I do, we can give bridge financing while they're waiting for money that's supposed to get to them. Otherwise, they have to pay a higher interest rate at a cost. And they pay the cost for someone else's delay. And so
sure,
you and that's hard to understand in the for-profit. It's very hard to understand. But in the nonprofit sector, these are the things you have to be conscious of. The other part I would say about nonprofit and for-profit where they are the same is both sides, and I've worked in both areas, care deeply. I would say this, everyone is the leaders get it. My work is linked to making sure that my team does the work they're supposed to do, but also They get paid and they're taking care of their families.
Sure.
And like you don't forget that. That responsibility is very strong. So in New York City, for example, 1 in 6 employees is at a nonprofit. So it's an economic engine in a
Sure.
city of tens of millions of people. So I give that because it's not an ancillary sector. It's a sector that's central to delivering services, and um, and so in some ways it doesn't get the respect that it deserves, but in other ways, I will tell you, there's no greater rewarding work, right? So there you go.
Indeed. Indeed. Um, let's talk a little bit about the relationship between fundraising goals and program development. We touched on that a
Sure.
little bit, but
Yeah.
how do you see that in your role right now, or looking
Yeah.
back over your career? You know,
Yeah. Absolutely. So when I see right now, particularly for the Center for Youth and the Future of Work, I have to speak in terms of a vision of
right?
what it will look like. What are people investing in? And this is where it's like the private sector. They're investing in you and your idea. There's no question. Like you have to be so clear that that is there. People want to believe in leadership as well as they want to believe in the possibility of that leadership and what they're doing. So you have to be able to transmit that with confidence. So that's important. They're not separate. They're
Yeah,
together. The other thing I would say is when you're thinking about program goals, I'm one of those where I feel really strong about piloting and doing something small first while I'm doing something main so that they have a taste of what could be the thing that can grow. And
sure,
that's actually something that people like to see too. There are some champions you build that are going to be, right? Like Drew, you're going to be one of those champions. You might just say, I just believe in that leader. Here you go for it. Go Tiger. And others are going to say, show me this. And then there. So you want to be prepared in ways that you can do that. So I always say it's great to have boards that support a certain amount where people can try innovation.
sure.
Just try it. Like support the risk taking. um, that's the board that has to really champion that for that leader and that nonprofit. And that helps a lot when thinking about growth.
Can you think? Is there maybe a recent or maybe not so recent example where you
Mm.
saw an
Yes.
example of somebody kind of taking an idea, taking a risk, as you said,
Sure.
um, and what do you know? I mean, that initial
Yeah.
pilot,
Yeah.
that initial experiment, um,
Sure.
ultimate.
It's interesting. I sit on boards as well too, so I get to see
Sure.
it from a board member perspective. And in one example, this is an organization that started in Brooklyn and moved to Manhattan, became citywide, and now is going to grow upstate.
Wow.
And this is an example where the people that came together to support this are both government and an individual donor, and that's exciting. So that's an example where it's supporting that something where they do something innovative and interesting. I will say that's definitely much more like the Center for Youth in the Future of Work. It's the only center that's focused that is an academic partnership, but I call it an action tag for young people in research. And so it's one of the few in the country, one of the only ones that I know of. And so people are like, "Oh, we started with the tiny study and now we're running three." And so you have a sense of like, "Whoa, how did that happen?" while also doing programming. So these are the pieces where you can give a taste. You can't be afraid to back something up. I I don't I'm probably not the best person to ask about risk because I'm predisposed to more risk, just now. But I also work with an incredible executive team that balances that too, right? I
Sure.
want to say that. And you need that. You need that. So I'm conscious of where I can take the risk and where I can't. Um, uh, Before I came to the fund, we never did national conferences. We did decided to do one. It was so popular. Now we're doing one every year. But
Yeah.
that was an example of we're just going to back this up. We're going to use our money. We're going to make it happen. And now it's like, oh, when's the next one? I was like, oh my God. So, but that is great because that was, you know, Someone said, "You supported AI by doing that." And I laughed because one of the members of my team said that he said, "You supported authentic interaction, that AI," which people crave as well too.
Sure, sure,
People
sure.
want to come together. And so the power of convening is an incredible communicator and brand extender. And that's something we have really, really taken advantage of at the Fund for the City of New York.
Love that. Love that. Let's, given your extensive career, many, 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 many achievements, maybe thinking a little bit about advice for people coming into the nonprofit
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
sector.
Mhm.
Um, what advice would you give for
Okay.
someone looking to build a career? Obviously, you've shared already a little bit of your story, but knowing what you know, what would you
Yeah.
say
So
to
I'd say, sometimes, so there is this notion that if you have an idea, you have to keep it to yourself. I actually think quite the opposite. Find your champions, find folks, and start talking about and anchor it of what you want to do. That's important. That's how you also own an idea and move that forward. I really believe in that. This is something I'm really passionate about. This is something I'm interested in. How can I meet others there? If you're starting out, it's so important to do as many internships as possible. It's so important to be able and comfortable to ask people. I always say this: you want to meet with busy people, never ask for an hour. Say you want 15 minutes. 15 minutes of someone's time. Can I meet you for coffee for 15 minutes? The best advice I've ever given people. I love when people say, "Can I just have 15 minutes of your time?" Yep, we could figure that out.
Yeah,
And
love
so
that.
I think that's what I think the other is that it is okay to try different things and sometimes trying them, you find out that's not for you. A a risk is not or trying something new is still a learning process. It's not wasted. And it's important to know that, to activate yourself, to be oriented to trying things.
Love that. There's an expression I love. It's not win or lose. It's win or learn.
Exactly. Win or
Um,
learn. And even when you're winning, you're learning.
yeah. Well, indeed, indeed. Um, what about a pivotal moment in your career that shaped your approach to leadership, your
Sure.
approach to leading or this nonprofit work?
Yeah. So, I mentioned a little bit earlier about someone who approached me and said, "I would love you to do this particular training." And it actually promoted me to go on and do my own consulting business on that. And then I went and moved in to do other work as well too. And that was an example where I was just like, yeah. A pivotal moment though early in my career was early. It shocked my family because I come from a working class family where I left a job without having another job. That was blasphemous. Okay, I'm not encouraging that of people. I'm not saying that. But I truly, well, A, I saved, but I truly believed that I was going to find what I wanted to do. And then I received two job offers and I found a way to negotiate with them to be consultants on both and that taught me something. That taught me enormously about how can you think through what you want to do in a way. And, it was a risk. But I learned so much about myself. I learned what it meant to work on things, what skills people thought stood out in me. And it always made me feel like I could always go back to that work if I wanted to. Now, I love building organizations and I believe in public service. You can make the impact of change you could make in a major government role or in a large nonprofit. It's pretty extraordinary. So I would never underestimate. I'd still love those opportunities, and I'm in one right now, obviously as running a large nonprofit. But I would say those early ones really taught me more about myself and risk taking. Reminded me that I had skills that are transferable, and reminded me that I like to do a lot of different things, and it's okay. That's in my DNA.
You're here. You're here. Final question. What skills, and you touched on that a little bit, that maybe kind of going in maybe a little more detail. What do you think are the
Yeah.
key skills today for somebody entering the nonprofit sector?
Well, I would,
Areas that they need to focus
um,
on.
okay, so I would say the nonprofit or for-profit sector is one is we're in an enormous, so one is it's good to have some basic tech skills, which they most likely will have because they're the digital they grew up in this generation of this is all they know. And a sense of AI, yes,
Yep.
meaning understanding how you may use it personally right now in your life, but how could it be applied in the organization you're in? But be conscious of the ethics and boundaries of that. But that's important. And the other thing is this idea of adaptability. When I think of the skills, they're important in the nonprofit or the for profit sector, is that, Drew, it's not like our parents that may have had the same job for 30 or 40 years. That doesn't happen. We're not going to see that. They're going to have so many career changes and shifts and pivots that it's important that they understand that early. And so, and then the last skill I think that's important is understanding how you show up professionally, both remote and in person. Really important because their hybrid is not going away. How you communicate remote, um, how you set up work environments to do that. Understand that about yourself. What are the environments that motivate and incentivize you or not? Are you a remote person or not? Are you a hybrid person? It's so important to kind of know and have that persona professionally understood as you go in because it will be to your advantage.
Love that. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and all of your insights and reflections. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Drew. Pleasure talking to you.